Hello. In the Crown of Aragon, 639 years ago, it was January 25th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is The Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Multcora Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. Let's begin today's document. Part of the reason I chose today's document is because right at the top is this really high interest word, Inquisitorum. And we're talking about Inquisition. But it's not the dreaded Spanish Inquisition of Monty Python. It is instead not that big of a deal. It is basically just the set of officers who are charged with investigating any troublemaking that might come up. And yesterday's document is a good example of the result of an inquisition in which the people who had been appointed to be in that role of inquisitor in Fraga had determined that it was the Muslims who were at fault for the violence that took place during or after or in the midst of the procession that had been organized to commemorate the death of Per the Ceremonious. In today's document, we're looking at something from a register that's titled Officialum. And this register is filled with appointments. So when somebody is appointed to an office within the apparatus of the state, meaning that they're granted authority from the Crown of Aragon government, the authority vested in the king or one of the other royal family members, and they're usually paid from the funds of the crown, as opposed to, say, the revenues that a city might collect from various streams of revenue of taxation that is carried out by a municipality. So in this document, the title is Inquisitorum Civitatem Gerudem. So this is Girona, the place where Joan and Violante lived until just a couple weeks ago. And there's some new inquisitors being appointed. Their names are all strung along in the very first two lines of the document. And then, as best as I can understand it, what we're looking at is a whole long justification for why there are inquisitors from a legal standpoint, from even a constitutional standpoint, and then also just in general that they have to carry out their duties according to the expectations of the law and according to the customs of the office. And I did not go through and transcribe this very long Latin document, because I could tell right away, again, that this was just not really as germane to my main focus of study, even though it still says a bunch of interesting things. And I'll point out a couple of those interesting things, but really, I just wanted to do a document from the Officialum so you could see what it looks like, and then also to have a chance to say that the Inquisition varied over time and place, that it wasn't always the kind of searching for witches and sorcerers, although there could be some less than scientific applications of the Inquisition and inquisitors at this time. It wasn't the fearful entity that you might have had in mind from some of the documents and media representations that you've come across before. The real cruel and outlandish Spanish Inquisition doesn't really appear in the 14th century and really doesn't appear in the Middle Ages. It's more a creation of the early modern period. This is something that a lot of medievalists really like to emphasize and repeat, which is that a lot of the horrible stuff that comes to mind when people say things like, I'm going to get medieval, it's actually stuff that happened after 1500, which is the general cutoff for the division between the Middle Ages and the early modern era. All right, let's get back to this document here. I just want to point out a couple things. In the second line, about 75 to 80% of the way through, there's a faint slash after salutem et gratiam, and the phrase begins cum iu something, there's an abbreviation, IU abbreviation, and then constitutiones Catalonem. I'm not quite sure about the end of that word. And then in the next line, generales. And then there's another slash. So I was really, really wanting to figure out what that IU word is after cum. And so I went through some of my notes from the Mediterranean seminar that I took on reading archival Latin in the archive of the Crown of Aragon, which had a lot of abbreviations. I couldn't find this one in there. I went to an online resource that has taken a lot of the work from the Capelli text of Latin abbreviations and put it in a searchable online database. Tried to find it there, could not find it. And so I was about to throw my hands up, and then I remembered, oh my gosh, Tranxodania and Baihesi Hardi, a lot of their documents about minstrels and troubadours have Latin transcriptions. And I just was looking at that the other day, and so I brought it up and I did a little find search in the PDF for just IU, and I guessed it was R, because I was pretty sure that I had seen the macron with that looks like a U with like a long line after the end of the U. I'm pretty sure I'd seen that used for an R. So I thought it was probably an IUR. And I looked at a couple documents and went to registers from different years and tried to and struck out. And then I was about to give up and I said, just one more. And yes, Bonanza. I found this exact abbreviation in a register from 1389, and I found out that actually I was wrong, because it's just a coincidence that the IUR was from a different word in that same little document, about 10 lines long. And then further down, I was just kind of scanning it, just kind of looking, and I saw that this was here. And I look at the transcription, and what is it for? Juxta. So if you're familiar with the English word juxtapose, well, the first part of that word is juxta, which comes from the Latin juxta, which means next to. And so here we have figured out that this is an abbreviation for juxta. So the phrase that happens in this document after Salutem et Gratiam is cum juxta constitutionis, and then the Catalonian Generales. So basically, what's being said here is according to the Constitution. It's so having this with next, these two words meaning, or when next, putting them together idiomatically will give you a translation like according to. According to the constitutions of the Catalonian General Assemblies, so on. Then what follows is the justification legally and the explanation of the role of inquisitor that these fellows are being appointed to. And then so on and so forth. We've got all the different expectations, duties, restrictions, and so on spelled out in full. And that is my Latin abbreviation mystery solved. And let me tell you, it is so nice when you get to a solution for one of those, when you've been looking through your notes and you're like, oh, it looks like it could be Iorum. I will point out here that when you usually see the abbreviation for Orum, the descender, the part that goes below the line, it's usually not diagonal like this one is. And if I can maybe find another instance that's close in this document, it would help to explain that a little bit. But oh yeah, actually just 1, 2, 3 lines down from cum is eorum, ab eorum. And so you can see that it's not as diagonal of a straight line as a descender there. And so this is the X. This is an X. So basically it looks like how we would write the letter P, but it's an X. And if you compare it to the way that the scribes write the Roman numerals for the date, which always has some X's in it, you'll see that this is an X. And so I was wrong about it being the letter R indicated in the abbreviation here. There's no R. The letters are I, U, X, and then what comes above the word stands for a TA in this situation. So there you had a really in-depth experience with some paleography and some Latin abbreviation. The scribes they loved their abbreviations. And this is one that I have seen before since I started the podcast, and it was really bugging me today. And so I finally got to scratch that itch and find out that this was Juxta, and now I will remember it forever. Okay, what does this say about the way that Joan and Violante were establishing their reign? Well, in a general sense, they're appointing people left and right, doing a lot of appointments. There's always people getting appointed to things and needs for taking care of turnover in these positions. So I can't really say that anything jumps out at me in this document as strange or weird. It's more of just giving everybody, including myself, an idea of just what a normal officialum appointment looks like. So if there is something really weird later on, I can understand that. All right. That brings us to the end of this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Multcora Companiona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I've done my job. Remember, the motto of The Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Does that mean that we're never going to hear about any weird or colorful Inquisition moments? No, there will be some. I promise, before this year is done. But for now, you're probably dissatisfied. So, promise fulfilled. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes. And listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care.